What is up, everybody? Let me invite Corona to the little chat. What we are talking about today is protesting like a Jedi. Did you get that? There you go.
Hello.
There we go.
Here we are.
Thought we were having one of those days again.
No, thank goodness we're not. It's going to work in our favor today because we need to help people, uplift people, and remind them that it's okay to protest like a Jedi and it doesn't always look the same.
Yeah. I would think the core need for protesting is that society isn't inclusive enough. So that does mean that there's not only one way to protest. And it's important to be inclusive.
And with that comes embracing people of all backgrounds, right? Not excluding one or the other, but being compassionate and open to humans in their human form, right? And putting aside a lot of those different characteristics that do separate us from other people's experiences, I think.
Yeah. Just like if you take old white guys, a lot of people give them grief and they blame them a lot for a lot of things that are going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And they may have been suffering for 425 days opposed to 435 years.
Mm-hmm.
But some of them are in a real power position to actually create change. So I think it's better if we're inclusive with our words, and we have to dig deep instead of just like, they hurt us, we're gonna hurt them back.
And what was that saying? Is that time is like, you can have the same bad, like, comparing, I don't like to compare experiences, but or pain, because it's hard to really measure pain. I mean, we have, right, a scale of how to measure physical pain, but that doesn't necessarily encompass different kinds of pain, right? I could be living 6 months of the worst pain ever possible, or someone, kind of like what you're saying, right? Someone could be living mild pain for about 6 or 7 years, right? But it's hard to really kind of compare the two situations, because you can't just take a ruler and measure this pain. You can't take a ruler and really measure the time, even, because time is relevant, but it also is irrelevant at the same, like, ironically, at the same situation. So yeah, it's really easy for us to point fingers and kind of enter this victim mentality.
I heard this. It was heard it a lot in self-help books, but it's a good thing when you point at somebody. Mm-hmm. There's 3 fingers that are pointing back at yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really want to solve problems, you got to understand the light and the dark. You got to understand masculine and feminine. You kind of got to go into their world and be willing to partner with people. But there are infiltrators. There are people that will get into your cause to destruct it. But you gotta become more Jedi to understand who's coming in and what the case is. But if we take American slavery, back many years ago, if you think of the slave owner, do you think of somebody that was very, very happy and very, very pure? or would it have to take somebody that wasn't totally all fine with themselves in order to torture a slave and to separate families? Is that somebody that you would think is just like totally like aligned with their self in a pure way, mentally, physically, and spiritually, without defining what that is?
Yeah, that's important.
So it's one of those things that we have to jump into it and have an understanding of it. And I have a lot of stories, but the stories are like simple messages that I came across that has helped me to be a more empowered person when I get involved in protests. So I want to tell you about a example. When I was 12 years old, I visited Barbados, and that's where my family's from. And in Barbados, they have music called calypso music. And as my friend David Moy, that writes for the Huffington Post, he says that calypso music is the CNN of the Caribbean. So
Hmm.
when I was, and this calypso came before reggae, um, and it was prevalent to that area. During Jamaican's independence, they created reggae because they wanted their own independent feel
Mm-hmm.
to it. So when I was down there, there was a politician whose name was Jack. And Jack was running on, he didn't want the locals that live on an island to be able to go bathe on the beach. That's what they call it, to go to the beach. Because having a lot of poor people during the beach on an island, you gotta go to the beach like sometime. Having a bunch of poor people begging tourists, that can affect your bottom line. But he
How
just came.
so? How so?
Um, some people might not want to go there because during on their vacation with their family, they're feeling guilty about things. Um, that's one of those things, and I'm not justifying that. Um, I mean, you spend a lot of money to go to some of these areas are some of these islands, not particularly Barbados. I mean, I'm sure it's not. I mean, even here in America, like some of these areas are like very very dangerous for you to be. In there. I don't really want to shame any areas, but we could name lots of areas. So, but there's ways of empower. If you go deep down in, there's ways of empowering your people
Mm-hmm.
to do stuff. But he comes up with the things is like, oh, the tourists. We talk to the tourists, and they feel guilty about this, even though it's these people's homeland. They feel guilty about this. Why don't we just like not have them go to the beach? They can stay in their.
Divert the attention, right? Divert.
Yeah, it's like Comic Con here. They have the homeless that live in tent cities kind of go to the outskirts of San Diego. There's like lots of areas that do stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm like empower your people. So there's this guy, the Mighty Gabby, that came up with this song Jack because the name of the politician was Jack, and the song went like this: Jack, don't want me to bathe on the beach. Jack,
Mm.
tell them to kick me out of reach.
Oh
Jack,
wow.
tell them I will never make the grade. Safe and security, build better arcade. That
Wow.
won't happen here in this country. I want Jack to know that the beach belong to me. The
Mm.
beach is mine. And so when this was written, the
Taking it
whole
back.
island was rocking
Wow.
and made Jack a laughter of the
Mm-hmm.
island because we all. So art is a very, very powerful thing, but we also need solutions in society to be more inclusive. And there's always going to be people on the outskirts that aren't going to get the system. There are going to be people that don't want to be a system, part of the system. I see myself as 1 foot on the grid, 1 foot off the grid. Because I don't necessarily buy into some of the social norms, but also I want to be, in my own way, a contributing member of society. So one of the things I told you, I grew up privileged, and my dad spent a boatload of money. My parents spent a boatload of money on my college education, and it wasn't a loan. They just did that, but it was a contract. It was a hidden contract that said, "Oh, all you have to do is be a contributing member of society." And I'm just like, "Oh, cool! I'm gonna go to college, to pay for college and everything like that." But when I started to make changes and open up at 38, growing dreadlocks was like not was a violation of my contract. So you may get a loan. Okay, let's take the term mortgage. It comes from a Latin word that means life hook. So you're less apt to be a whistleblower if you have a mortgage, if you have a family, if you have all these different things that are buying into society. When 100 years ago, still in Mexico, you could just find a plot of land and I mean, not everywhere in Mexico, but build a house on it. How come we have to have the plot of land built by the city? We have to have a bank loan us the money because most of these houses, and it's never enough for us. We always have to have more. And I'm not necessarily saying that's wrong at all. But what I'm saying is it getting in the way of your own morals? Don't care what your morals are unless they're like sick pedophile shit. But
And
if it's
this also takes us back to last week's topic with microdosing the darkness, right?
yeah.
Is how much of that darkness are you willing to put in or out of whatever cause you have, and is it going to help propel you forward, or is it going to continue pulling you back from progressive change or change that is heart-centered, right? Because we know that when you do things out of love, when you act out of love and you use your heart center, you have a completely different output than when you don't.
Yeah, for sure. I want to use the word compassion instead of
Mm-hmm.
love,
Mm-hmm.
because
What is the difference for you between compassion and love?
so
How can you compare the two?
heart centered would be more aligned in compassion. Um, it's that wouldn't be a fair question to ask me what it is for love, because it's different for a lot of people.
Well, how would you define it? How do you see it is the question. How would you
So
define the difference?
I don't believe in unconditional love, because if I give unconditional love, then I expect other people to give me unconditional love, and then that's a condition. So I want everybody to pause and breathe whenever you're watching this and think about something that you hate in the world, not necessarily a person, but something that, like, how they like are fucking with our water, how women are treated, something that really just gets you upset. And then I want you to take that and combine it with pure love. And I believe that is compassion. Because one of the issues with a lot of these protests is that people don't get the fuck out of the way of themselves
Mm-hmm.
and the people that are involved. They're too busy. There's a lot of nonprofits that started with very pure intentions, but they're just as greedy as any organization.
Because of
Um,
ego, right? People who are driven by ego, usually.
Ego, sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Greed.
like for
All
instance,
the darkness.
yeah. Say if you had an organization for autism, and then all of a sudden somebody's like, okay, this is how you end autism in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Those companies aren't going to. 99.9% of those companies are not, they may be open for a short conversation, but
Mm-hmm.
as far as implementation, they're not going to take the time for implementation on
Mm.
that, because they're thinking about my mortgage. Oh shit, my mortgage needs to be paid and stuff, and they're blocking it out. But that shit pops up every once in a while on a daily basis. So I believe compassion will help get you out of the way. You're not going to say, "Oh, I got to go take a class," and I think the laws are a perfect example. Sorry,
Mm.
the Amber Alerts.
Mm-hmm.
So these two parents lost their daughter, Amanda. She was kidnapped. So now in California, I'm not sure if it's all over the United States. If a kid's kidnapped,
Mm-hmm.
they have these signs all around, and they
Mm-hmm.
go to your cell phone that it has the name of a car and the license plate. So you
Mm-hmm.
got a bunch of people working. So when the Amber's parents lost their daughter, they could have, as much as anger as I talked about it, they could have just like given up on society totally. That would have been like they could have committed suicide or whatever the case is. But what they did is they got targeted with love, pure love.
Mm-hmm.
They felt, I don't want anybody to go through what we're going, this pain that we're
Mm-hmm.
feeling. I'm going to make the rest of my life calling so nobody ever feels this again.
Hmm.
And they got laser focused. They didn't say, "Oh, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Harvard and I'm going to get my degree in such and such and such, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the social respect." And they're going to do is no. What they did is they had that compassion guide them, and they went to politicians, and they had a following enough to get those politicians to take action. That shit could have been created before. There's been many lost children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the compassion can be available by you losing a child, or it can be
Mm-hmm.
available with all of a sudden the wind blowing, and then you're seeing just somebody that's sad, and they just might be sad over something small. I mean, it might
Mm-hmm.
not be small to them, but it might just be like they just broke up with their. So you can feel that compassion and that empathy for somebody, and then all of a sudden it can open up a door. You can have a
Mm.
butterfly fly by and feel compassion. And I'm not saying it to have compassion for all things, but I'm saying if you do that and you're working at your office or you're working at as whatever you're doing, that compassion can be so much powerful because you're going to get out of the way of yourself and
Mm-hmm.
everything flow and come together faster with less effort. And you can spend that
And
time.
also we can also tie in empathy, right, to this.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And empathy is different. Empathy is different from compassion because you can be empathetic of someone's situation and not have compassion.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Empathy
Compassion
is,
is greater than empathy. If there's one quote I can throw out there that I picked up from my experience while at San Diego State, Professor Nericho, shout out to him, William Nericho, Bill. He said to us in a class one day, he's like, compassion is greater than empathy. And it took me a moment. It took me a moment to really understand what that meant, at least to me.
yeah, yeah. And what does it mean to you?
When you're, it kind of goes back to the heart center, right? When you are leading with compassion, there's just this more magnetized feeling to it because you almost feel like your heart is connected to their heart. That's how the best way that I can really explain it. It's like I get this visual in my head of Frida Kahlo, right? Her painting where it's two different um, portraits of her sitting down, and her brain and her hearts are connected to one another. And yeah, compassion would be heart centered. It would be feeling the connectedness from one heart to the other, and empathy would probably be from one brain to the other,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
So a good difference between uh, sympathetic and empathetic.
Sympathetic.
Um, uh, Somebody explained this to me when I was a trainer for a company called Dale Carnegie, and he said what the difference between sympathetic and empathetic is. If you see somebody and they're thinking about jumping off a bridge, and if you go up there with empathy, you'll say, hey, I understand you're going through stuff. We've all gone through stuff. But there's a better light. Listening to them. That's empathy. Sympathy would be hold their hand and like, let's jump. Sympathy, you're kind of taking yourself down
with
to
them.
their level. So it's what a lot of people are doing. They're gossiping. Women are complaining about men. Men are together, complaining about women. Gay people are together, complaining about gay people. Christians are together, complaining about Christians. So that's one of the things in spirituality that's very powerful is the I am. So if you want to solve problems, I am.
Affirmations.
Yeah. That's the positive affirmation from that, but also affirmations for like, you want to figure out like how these CEOs think, and you got to get rid of your anger if you want to like really go in there and try and figure out how they think and think of their moves, but not get in a way that you're like all of a sudden tapping in their energy. A lot of people got into Donald Trump's energy and became like that. For instance, so have you ever heard of Godzilla?
Yeah.
Do you know the concept from Godzilla? I may have shared this with you before. So the underlying concept that a lot of people that are into it might not know that concept. So after the U.S. dropped a bomb,
that's right,
on that, they created Godzilla. And what Godzilla would do is would protect the Japanese from atomic bombs, but then they would attack the people when they want to have an enemy to fight. And that's how our leaders are. We keep voting for these vicious individuals that they get into those positions, and they're real good at protecting us. Which it's not protecting it because they're creating more enemies a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And even here they're having us fight against each other.
Right.
And usually in a lot of these fights and everything, the true people that cause these problems are not even in the room. And it's a sad thing.
Wow.
So I went to Vegas, and this is kind of a little raw story, but I went to Vegas a little after I graduated. Hey, Amanda, you want to join us? I went to Vegas when I was fresh out of college. So I was with a lot of college friends that were still in college. And it was somebody was getting married, and we hired a stripper. It's legal in Vegas to have a stripper come to your room. And the two women come in there and they're saying, okay, we want you to pick one. We had like 20 guys in the room. We want to pick one guy from your group to negotiate with the two strippers. And it was Ryan. Well, is the guy that we had. We all picked him. So he goes and talks with them, and they're like, okay, we're going to do this, and we need this much money. So he hands them all the money, and they're supposed to entertain for an hour and a half, 2 hours. They did 10 minutes. And then we're going to Ryan. He's like, hey, we told him this is the situation. Then they got more money from us, and I'm new into business. These guys are fresh out of still in college. We didn't have a lot of money,
Mm.
so we gave more money than we wanted to do to get them to stay for a while. But they talk with Ryan, and then all of a sudden they do like a 5 minute thing, and we spent more money than we wanted. But we're not guys that are gonna like put our hands on women because we got conned or whatever the case is.
Mm.
So they leave. We even know like it's not smart for us to even argue with them.
Mm-hmm.
Like because we're in Vegas, like we could like earn a building. They have a backup plan.
Hustler town, Steve. You
Yeah,
just
yeah.
got hustled.
So, but listen to this. We leave and everybody's yelling at Gultz. That's right. That's Ryan. I gave his whole name. Everybody's yelling at Gultz, and I'm not yelling, but I'm like upset. And all of a sudden, 2 minutes in, I go, they only negotiated with him so we wouldn't know what they said.
Mm.
I go, don't get mad at him. I was mad at him a few minutes ago. Don't get mad at him. That could have been any one of us put in that situation. And we trusted him to do it. That's what our leaders are doing to us.
Wow. Yo, I can't even, you know what? It's funny that you mention all of this because I actually came to the realization of this morning. I had a conversation with my boss. He's the chair of the Department of Chemistry at San Diego State. And it's been a while, right, since I've been working from home and able to do the whole virtual check-in for work, right? And that's coming to an end as of December, given that they want everybody to come back and populate. And he's been doing a really good job of being transparent, looping me in, checking in with me and making sure that everything on my end is okay. And as I was talking to him,
Hello.
he was telling me, "Hi, baby girl." He was sharing that the president of the university was where the problem lied, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
as I'm sitting there, talking about this with him, I'm like, you know what? I was like, at this point, this is something I didn't realize 5 years ago or 6 or 7 years ago when President Hirschman was in office. I saw him as my target, not knowing that sometimes there's even powers beyond him or other entities that are making these decisions, and you don't even get to know what they look like, what their names are, or any of that. That's really interesting.
You remember, and then we'll bring Amanda in after this.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
You remember the first event that I met you at when we were in that room, and there was a bunch of
congregations
when we left the room for the Hirschman thing.
Yes.
But there was a bunch of priests in the room, and they brought this lady from housing.
Yes.
Down there, and everybody was shouting her down. So you had a bunch of priests, you had a bunch of women that in any other situation, they would be upset if you were shouting down a woman.
Oh, but let me tell you that situation did lead to more intimate conversations with her and other administration, and she broke down. She started crying because she was attacked. And so, we had to tap into our heart center and realize that wasn't wrong, number one, because someone legitimately pushed her. They put their hands on her. And this was something that was not acknowledged to me. My role in that meeting was to disrupt and basically get over 130 people to walk over and crash a big donor party that was happening for SDSU athletics.
Yeah, yeah.
My intention was not to create violence at that point, right?
No,
but when something like that.
Yeah, yeah. But one thing I wanted to talk to you is that lady was very vicious towards me. She would
Interesting.
always come in Starbucks every day, and she was very vicious towards me.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
But listen to this. That was the first I was seeing her there, and even though she was very vicious to me, I was sitting in my seat and I was ready to take on the full room to protect her.
Wow. Because you saw her.
Because first I'm like, well, she's not really in a position. Well, it turns out because something worked there. So
Mm.
so we I don't want to necessarily put judgment on there, but there is
Mm-hmm.
everybody kind of what there wasn't as much integrity, but probably some of that lack of integrity caused that to happen. So I don't want to necessarily get into there, but I
Mm-hmm.
was saying I didn't like how that was, and even though I didn't like that fucking lady, I'll be perfectly honest, but I was prepared to take on the whole room to
Mm.
protect her.
Wow.
And I don't even know if I could say hi to her. like
Yeah.
and I'm not doing it to pass judgment, but I'm just saying that this stuff's not as easy as we make it a lot of times. So, Amanda,
Yay.
Hello.
we talked about a lot of things, but we don't know where you necessarily fall on protesting.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on it, and I haven't like really protested myself physically. You know, I have signed a lot of petitions. Um, for me and myself, what I've experienced is I feel like what I learned, I actually used to work at Lush. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Lush or not.
Yeah.
So it's a natural skincare company, started out of Canada about like 40 years ago or so. But they are all about environmental rights, human rights, and animal rights. So we were always, Sophia, we were always having campaigns. If it wasn't a holiday, if it wasn't a season, we were having a campaign for one of the charities we were supporting. And it was all until we had a campaign on the death penalty, of which really shook me and woke me up and made me realize how everything is political in a sense, you know, and there's a lot of people that have control over even what we think we're fighting for, if that makes sense. Um, and it made me realize like there's a lot for us to learn, and there's different ways we should go about defending ourselves and our rights. But it is hard. It is super hard in a world like this, because how do you do it calmly and get things done? But when you act out in violence, you know, when it comes to protesting and lighting buildings on fire and just, you know, like destroying things or hurting the person that's on the opposite side because of your own opinions or beliefs, it's hard. You know, it's a very protesting, I feel like, is a very, there's a very thin fine line that can be crossed on either sides, even when it comes to police, when it comes to authority. It can, I feel like it can get quite dangerous because they don't know how to, kind of like what y'all were talking about, how being in the position that they're in, it's hard for them too. You know, it's hard for police to be in a certain position where they're having to protect the city or protecting, you know, things from being looted, and then they feel like it's their job and duty to defend. And so it's just a huge, you know, retaliation on both ends. So I'm conflicted. For me, I don't think I would ever go out and protest unless something was going on with somebody I knew in my community, and I know I could be a voice for them, and it not be a risk for myself or for others in the environment, you know. That's what I love about petitions, signing petitions, because it's really harmless, but the more like signatures that you can get really goes to show how many people want to make that difference, you know, especially now in a world where it's nothing but technology. We all, you know, so it's easy to get those signatures. It's easy to spread the word that way without instigating some sort of violence, you know. That's my own experience, because I haven't been in any
So
actual physical
so
protest.
So Amanda, I would like to challenge you. for the fact of how much you care about nature and how much you care about the what you're putting in your products, then that's
Mhm.
that's protest.
I wanted to jump in on this real quick. Because in my head I kind of got shooken up while you were talking, and I remembered that sometimes us showing up is an act of is us being activists, right? It's us
Right.
protesting. Us waking up sometimes
Oh yeah.
is us protesting, right? Us
Yeah.
doing work as mothers. Mother work is protesting. Single mother work specifically as well too.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
no,
this,
And,
I
and
mean, it just kind of clicked in my head how that's, it's really powerful, and it is an act of protest because, I mean, in past times, right, we're expected to do this work sometimes. I mean, depending where you come from, either it can be communally, it can be with a partner, right?
yeah.
It can look so different, but the fact that the way that people mother sometimes can also be an act of protest, an act of resistance.
I would say how we conduct ourselves in between protests is far more great than being there at the actual protest. So, for instance, like I'll say the same thing. I believe how you conduct yourself outside of church is more important of how you conduct yourself inside a church.
Absolutely. Our actions speak louder than words.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of people may show up and at a yoga studio and they know how to be like very peaceful when they're doing their yoga, but then they're just like everybody else in all these situations.
Yeah.
Like for instance, I spent a lot of times talking to the guy that edits my video in Pakistan, um, about how, because he was like wondering why I didn't want to talk on the phone as much, and I was like, because you got this, you got this 100%. And he kind of went into saying that he goes in Pakistan, he goes, we're all stressed working and everything. I know it's different in your country. And I was like, no, it isn't. It's the same thing. There might be to a different level, and I'm not saying I understand the level of suffering that they're going through, or even some of the people that in the US are going through. But I go, that may be true with all the your other clients, but with me, you got to show up Jedi. You got to know that I've got you on this project, and if you like physically need to know something, but if you're doubting yourself, I'm that's the only time I'll get mad at you, when you don't see how awesome you are. Because I was like, because we're doing a project that I'm giving him extra money, which is a protest, to give to people in Pakistan, and then all of a sudden show like an example of how simple it could be. And I go to him, I'm like, I don't know Pakistan. I don't know what you guys need. Make that part of the documentary. I go, I don't want to have conversations about this. I just want to see the videos up on the channel, just like everybody else is seeing it. And he's like, oh, I get it. He's like, you are my brother. You're my older brother. And then I gave him the time. I gave him the term is probably going to be spreading all over Pakistan. Brother from another mother. He was so excited about that.
I think now that you Corona, you made me think of protesting and how it it is a part of our daily lives. I think setting boundaries is the like most important part of protesting, and I think that's kind of what everyone in this world right now is doing, is learning their boundaries, with relationships, with people in their lives, with themselves, with the decisions they make, with the country that they're living in, with their government. Everyone's learning right now that they have to set some sort of boundaries,
And let
because
me sprinkle a little bit of dark onto that, knowing when to cross those boundaries.
right. It's hard to cross those boundaries now. It's
Mm-hmm.
getting harder and harder, you know, and and that's why for me it's a huge conflict. I know we're supposed to protest. I know we're supposed to speak out. I know we're supposed to stand up for ourselves, but when is the right time to do it, and how do you do it, you know, and what kind of ways can you do it where you're not going to be attacked, or you are going to be able to reach, you know, enough people without coming across in a way that can be divided, you know what I mean? Because when it comes down to it, when we're protesting for our rights, it shouldn't be a divide. It shouldn't be like there shouldn't be two sides to the coin. It should just be, you know, I'm fighting for rights because I deserve it and because you deserve it, not because I'm better than you, or because I'm a certain skin color, or because of whatever differences it may be. You know, when it comes down to it, it's specifically about each individual person deserves to be free and deserves to make like whatever choice they want to make, as long as it's not harming somebody. And as fucked up as this opinion may be, I even think that you kill somebody, that's your own decision. You've made that. You have to live with that now. Nobody else should get involved, really, unless, of course, I mean, there's certain situations where it's just wrong. But when you're defending yourself, you know, like women ending up in jail for killing a man who's raped her. I've seen it so many times, and they spend years in prison for it. And I've even myself thought about, you know, assaulting or even killing my perpetrator at one point in time when I was young. I was only 14 years old. And I thought, I want this abuse to stop. What if I just took his life, you know? But I knew even then, as a young child with morals, that there was consequences, especially living in a world like this. Even if I was a young adolescent child, I would still be committing a crime. I would still be committing murder, you know? And now he's assaulted 5 other young women under the age that I was at then. They were 7, 11, 13. And detectives are, you know, here at my door, like they're going to do something. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do? And he's still out on the streets, you know? So for me, that's why it's like, you know, we should live in a world of free will. We should be able to make our own choices without consequence, because sometimes we are the consequence, you know, or because if you make an action, why should this system do something about it? You know, I'm kind of, my mindset's kind of Wild West, you know, where it's like, if you do something, you harm me or you harm my family member, I want to take action. I don't want to just sit back and depend on some law officer who maybe wouldn't even be able to handle the situation correctly, you know. I've seen cases where women are like, he's dangerous. I've seen videos where literally the woman's like, please get me out of my home, come escort me. Hold on, baby, not right now. You know, before he gets home, and the officers are like, okay, there's 3 men at the front door and they're all with their hands on their belt. And she's like, you don't understand, he's got guns. And sure enough, the dude comes in behind, and you know, in the front door while they're all waiting, and literally shoots all the officers. And they just were caught completely off guard. And it's like, you know, sometimes they can't protect us. Sometimes the system can't protect us. And that is why we have to. No, no es mío. No es mío. Oh, Dora's. Okay. 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 Sí, sí, okay. Oh, okay. ¿En Irma's cuarto? ¿En tu cuarto? Sí. Sorry.
I didn't know you spoke Spanish.
A little bit. I speak a little bit. I
That's
understand.
beautiful.
So yeah, that's my roommate here. I live with 2 women, and one, she's an elder. She's 90 something years old. She's got all, so she has her moments where she's up and down and stuff. But
I
yeah,
think I wanted to bring up one of the things that Steve and I discussed at some point, and it was right in regards to men specifically who do these kinds of ugly, horrendous, horrible things, right?
mm-hmm.
Who raises these men?
Right.
Where did these men come from?
what type of upbringings did they have? And it's, I mean, it's such a complicated issue.
Oh yeah,
When we break it down, because there's so much trauma involved and so much re-trauma, right,
exactly.
with people who are younger, with children, right?
And that's why that one campaign
Mm.
that was our final campaign as I was working there, our final big campaign, which was it was demolishing the death penalty, because their point was, if somebody's committed a crime, we shouldn't shun them for it. We should help them heal. We should go back to their roots. That was their main thing, was the roots, the root. It wasn't necessarily the action, but what created that action. So whether the person was raised up in a home where they were poor, they were lacking love, self-care, food. Sophia, please stop it, baby. You're being rude and I'm on the phone. So, and there was a lot of conflict, especially being here in Texas, when we trying to get people to sign that petition, it was the hardest campaign we had.
I can imagine.
We even had one against trophy hunting.
Yeah.
I got hunters to sign that petition, which gives me goosebumps just thinking about it, because and reliving it, because I got to hear from actual hunters, like one-on-one, for them to personally tell me how wrong they think it is to trophy hunt and to just kill something, to stuff it and put it on your wall, because here in Texas, these hunters are like, no, you use everything that you get from that animal, if you're going to take its life. And even, that's when I learned too about meat becoming gamey, is if, it's still here into the animal before it dies, it becomes like chewy and grainy, so they kill the animal while it's in peace, while it's eating, and and they only take the elders, or they don't take the children, they don't take the female. It's very interesting, and I was like, I have respect for that, and I got a lot of hunters to sign that. But when it came around to the death penalty, everyone was like, no, you did something wrong. You're taking your ass out, you cross the lines, you cross the boundaries, you don't deserve to live. So it was eye-opening for me, because I feel that way partially, but in the other end, I know that every human being deserves to heal. But we have to understand too, and this is from my experiences with certain people, when the mind is damaged in a way, like, for example, my stepdad, I was really weirdly in psychology, and almost after every time my stepdad would physically assault me, or I would ask him why. I would be in tears, breaking down, crying, and I would ask him, what's making you do this? What happened to you as a child? And he would tell me, my parents beat me. I had to raise 13 brothers and sisters on my own. It was an abusive home. We were poor. We didn't have money. Dad was out drinking all the time. And then he was sexually abused by a female when he was 11. So, I felt bad for him. I genuinely felt bad for him every time. And I'm like, well, just stop doing what you're doing, stop the drugs, stop the alcohol, stop everything that you're trying to consume to fill this empty void. But he couldn't. Some people can't. And maybe it is because the system is so messed up that we're not really giving people a chance to heal from this, or the way to heal from it is hard. It's difficult. It's not an easy path to take. So most people don't want to take it. And when they don't want to take it, they have no, they have no light in them. And then what they're doing is they're just taking out everyone's light around them. So for me, that's where it's like, what do you do in that case? But in a world like this, there's always going to be duality. There's always going to be, again, like what we were talking about in the couple videos before, microdosing the darkness. It is what it is. Like, we learn from these experiences too. There are going to be people that suffer that aren't going to get out of it, that are going to stay on that vibration. And I feel like that's also too to teach us that why we need to protest for ourselves, why we need to stand up for ourselves and set these boundaries, so that we don't continue to enable people or ourselves to repeatedly do the same thing, that's harmful.
So One of the things I wanted to thank you very much for that. One of the things I wanted to interject, Arturo was talking about how his grandfather used to beat his dad, and then his dad tried to beat him. Don't know exactly what that means. I mean, I know his dad couldn't beat him now, and then he doesn't beat his children. I've been involved. I'm trying to not name any specific people, but I've been involved in some projects with artists that are very successful, been successful for a while. And these guys would kind of be upset about what's going on with the Black Lives Matter, and they want to tell the police what to do. They want to tell the politicians what to do in this space. But these same artists are very, very aggressive towards their children with words and with putting their hands on them. And I'm not necessarily absent, never put your hands on a child, but I believe they're taking it too far. And if you're going to try and tell the police to treat your children a certain way, I mean, but you're not doing it in your own home, and violence begets violence. And it's not necessarily the best answer. Does somebody want to say something?
So you're talking about how violence isn't the best answer when dealing with your kids. I guess I definitely do believe in that. I myself experienced it. I experienced the violence in my home. And again, that's something that I feel like once you do it, once you bring it into that child's life, it starts to grow and fester and it grows like a disease. And whether or not you do it a lot, or whether or not, you feel like it's right what you're doing, I definitely think that it instills some sort of negative, vibration frequency or thought process, fear into the child, which is not good. I feel like part of the programming we've received here through media, through music, through movies, through all this programming, we end up doing things like this and thinking that it's okay, but what it causes is more trauma that we have to heal from, instead of trying to communicate better, set those boundaries with your children. When my daughter's crossing the line with me, I'll just walk away from her, and I'm like, you're not getting your toys today. We're not going to have this conversation. I'm not going to sit here and combat with you in a conversation or an argument. Like, it is what it is. This is what I said, and and I walk away. Then that's what I've read is the best way to handle a child when they're not listening, is to just let them be, let them know why you're giving them their space if they've crossed the boundaries. And I think it's the same thing with any person, any adult that crosses your boundaries. Sometimes it's better to explain yourself and just leave them be, like, let them learn their lesson.
I don't have any children, but I was in a relationship that a woman's two of her children called me dad for some time. But I was a child at some point, and I know that it's important that you're clear with anybody when you're giving it, even if, like, a lot of times when you're explaining stuff to even like really successful people, if they're like an uncomfortable situation and they're not receptive and they do something wrong, you got to be really clear to them of the mistake they made.
Yeah.
And you have to slow things down, and especially you'd want to do that to a parent. I remember, and due respect, that, and I don't think this was the ultimately best I could have done in this situation, but there was a lady that came into a Starbucks, and she was with her daughter, and her daughter was probably around 4 or so, and they came in a lot. and this young little lady, she never was acting up. And the mother was mad at her, and she's just riding into this little girl for about 2-3 minutes. And I'm like bottled up, trying not to snap. And I'm just like sitting there, I'm sitting in there, I'm just like, not stop. And then all of a sudden I saw this one guy that was kind of hard on his life, and I was like, and I saw he was upset about it. And I was like, oh, that's probably how his parents talk to. Is this somebody at the Starbucks? And all of a sudden the little girl looked at me. And I'm like, okay, it's on. So I walked out, I was walking out to the part, and I was like, so when I go to the lady, I go, so when your daughter's acting up when she's older, I just want you to know she's acting up because of what you're saying right now. And then I turn to walk out, and she goes, no, I want to hear this, and puts her hand on her hip. And I just like went, and I wasn't smiling, and I don't think it's necessarily a way to smile, because I kind of felt uncomfortable having to do this to her. I go, that right there is a little angel. It's not your dad. It's not your mom. It's not your enemy. Treat her like an angel. And then nobody in the Starbucks said anything to stand up for her. And it was probably something that a lot of people wanted to say to her. But I said it, and I don't think that was the ultimately best thing I could have said to her. I would like to take her aside and like pay for therapy or something for her. That's what I would ultimately like to do. And I just wanted to say that one thing, and then she like all of a sudden like challenged me, put her hand on her hip. So I just like said, okay, I'm gonna say it. And she came in there a couple other times. I think she ended up going to other Starbucks. That was the only time that I had talked to her. But I knew I was a reminder of like, yeah, don't treat that little angel like that.
It's interesting, the first thing that you said, that this is why she's going to be acting out in the future, because of what you're saying to her right now. And I heard something interesting recently, some article based on how what you tell your child, it's kind of the same way that, the law of attraction is. Whatever we speak out, we speak into existence. And it's kind of the same way, I think, the way we speak to our children. If we're telling our kids constantly, you're being bad, and I try not to say that to Sophia. I'm like, you need to act right, you need to behave, you need to be a good girl, not that you're bad, you're misbehaving, cut it out, act right. I think we need to alter the words that we use to instill that into them. Because what I had read was, when you're constantly telling your child something negative that they're doing, they're going to continue to keep doing it, because that's all they know. You're not trying to tell them something different. Like, you're an angel, you are of love and light, you're smart, you're happy, you're a good kid, you're well behaved. Like, I think if we started speaking to our kids more like this instead of out of frustration, we would get more feedback from them and actually see a change and a difference.
And it was interesting that when I said this to this lady, she wasn't concerned that her daughter was okay, that this crazy man is confronting her like that. When I was doing this, I was checking to see if the little girl was okay when I was saying this to her mom.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to because I remember this one guy his name's Aaron Bruce, Corona knows who he is. He was very questionable about like what I was doing on campus. He was just like he was the head of diversity, but he didn't like the most diverse person on campus. And we don't want to talk why he ended up having to leave the campus. But one time he came in with his daughter, and I all of a sudden was like mind blown. I was like, oh my goodness, like all the negative energy that I'm sending towards him is going to his daughter on some level. Like, where does that energy go? I go, I can't do this anymore. I can't hate this guy anymore. even though I don't like a lot of stuff that he does and how he goes about stuff. I just can't do that. And that was the thing, that the B thing that I came up with, that whole thing was based on that, like how to harmonize with your enemies, because I didn't want to put like negative energy towards it that's ultimately going towards his daughter, or his, I
Yeah.
think he may have two. So
It's interesting you say that too, because lately as I've been going through my healing process, you know, and I've kind of always felt this way because I've been extremely empathic, and you know, even if somebody has hurt me, I try to like understand why, or where, you know, where they're coming from. But lately, more so than ever, I have to remind myself, I'm like, you know, send them love and light, send them healing, send them, you know, some wisdom so that they can understand what they're doing, you know. Hopefully they can see the light, because I think I've been reading up about narcissists a lot, because I think there's a few people in my life who are, and reading about it, it really makes me understand why, you know, they don't show the empathy that they do, why they don't have the remorse for what they're doing, you know, why they can just like drop you, you know, like that, and literally, you know, and it's because of the way that their mind is. It has been altered, and they need healing. You know, there's a big imbalance in the brain, or the brain connected to the heart, and the heart connected to the body, the spirit, you know, all of it. Something's out of line, and they need to fix it, you know. And sometimes we can't do that on our own, or we can't go out and seek that help. Sometimes we need prayer, sometimes we need, you know, we need some sort of support sent our way in order to heal, or at least just love, you know, good love and good vibrations sent to us, and not just so much negativity, because then it's just going to continue to fester. Whatever that bad thing is, or that bad person is, you continue to send that negative energy that way, and they're never gonna heal. So for me, I've learned, I'm like, I just have to pray for the people in my life, that they come to realization, you know, that what they're doing, in hopes that they'll make a change, and they're not going to continue to affect people like that in their lives around them. So it's hard
one,
for me
yeah,
to.
go good. Thanks for
No,
sharing
no.
that. One of the things that Corona was talking about, and I don't know if we necessarily addressed it when you were talking about boundary. When Amanda was talking about boundaries, you were talking about one times when we have to like kind of break past those boundaries, um, those limitations of society, that kind of like society says this is a certain way, and it's like now the time to confront that. And I don't think it's about getting that perfect, but it's about measuring yourself and being accountable that you want to get it at the right time.
I really thought about how, so remember how we were talking earlier and we discussed slavery and how sometimes there's infiltrators. So I mean, this takes us back to just American history, right? Where if we wouldn't have had white folks who were probably previous slave owners join the movement to free the slaves, it probably wouldn't have been possible. And that was them breaking past those boundaries, right? Those boundaries that were set up at that time to continue keeping people enslaved. And I mean, I
It's like
personally, if
Schindler's
I'm
List.
going to be honest and upfront, I don't really feel like we've moved past slavery. I continue to believe that we still do live in an era where it exists.
The
I
thing
just
is,
feel like
though,
it's
is we're
presented
all in.
differently, right?
It's not. It's not just one race or the other that's enslaved. It's all of us.
Yeah, it's on a different scale. It looks different. That's what I'm saying. Like, it looks differently, right? Because now we
Yeah.
have money circulating. And anyway, but that was kind of why I said that. Sometimes it is important to break those boundaries. Sometimes it is important to break past that and push for a change, because there's, I mean, if and this is focusing with heart centered, right? It takes us back to that as well. Is this heart centered? I think that's one of the main questions we should be asking ourselves.
Yeah.
And if it isn't, what way can I challenge the situation while being heart centered and become an agent of change, which a lot of the times is challenging the norm. It is pushing boundaries. It's microdosing that darkness and making somebody feel uncomfortable enough that they're willing to also be heart-centered and work toward a change or toward a better tomorrow or a better future, whatever that is or looks like. Right?
Yeah.
So what is y'all's best way to protest like a Jedi? What do you think's the best way to protest well, there's really in a lot of ways, but I guess when it comes to maybe the situation at hand, like what we have going on, what we're dealing with as a whole, like the entire world, with this. I don't want to like be specific, but what do you think is the best way to protest, and how do you go about doing that and doing it daily, incorporating that into your like daily life?
So Lizzie and Me,
Yeah.
that book, I consider that a protest.
Yeah.
And I have created over the last 15 years like many ways of going about that.
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, there's so many different kinds of and ways to protest, and even now more so, right, with COVID, and we have a different change in the situation, right? Society isn't what it once was post-pandemic, and obviously time always is going to change or complicate things or make them easier on certain ways and aspects. But for me specifically, it is defying authority for me. Okay. It is defying authority when I feel that there's something that is inhumane, unfair. I'm a very flexible person, and I usually try to expect people to have that same approach and be sustainable in their ways and think sustainably. Now, that's not always a common thing, right? The way I protest is showing up to work virtually, not getting the COVID shot. Not to say that I don't believe that I'm an anti-vaxxer or that I believe you shouldn't get the shot. Not at all.
But it's the way that it's being forced where
exactly for me, it's exactly that.
It's not
me not
that
feeling
it's an
comfortable.
option. Right. It's
Yeah,
not like
me not having the option to decide that for my body, me having gone through COVID, having still relapses, I feel, right? It's my body. I can tell you what I feel in my body. I can speak for myself. Right.
Yeah.
And it's having an employer that preaches that they are the leaders, right? That they do aspire to be a certain type of university, that they do want to push for research and inclusion and all of these little things. And meanwhile, me with my complicated situation where I can't just move back easily to San Diego and find a babysitter for my son and find all of these resources that are going to help me survive, because I don't get paid $30,000 a month. I'm sorry, 40 or over a year, right? I get paid minimum wage, right? And is that sustainable for my son? And so my situation now, has allowed me to have a little bit more stability, because I'm not driving to and fro. I don't have to pay a babysitter. I don't have to do all of these other things that are costing me, right? It's costing me more to work for you than it is work for you in person than it is to work from you afar. And that is sustainable. In my eyes, if you want to be a green campus like you preach, why don't you become that leader? Challenging them, asking them these questions, but also saying, okay, you want me back? Guess what? I'm going to defy that. I'm going to continue working from home until I'm breaking for me, it's breaking the law. Not that I want to break the law. I don't want to get to that point, right? But I do want to challenge them and put the pressure on them enough for them to see me in my humanity, for them to see me as a whole, right? Go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off, but I don't think I say I follow laws but don't follow rules. I think that's a rule. I don't think it's a law.
Okay, a rule. Right. I don't believe in being a criminal. I don't believe in
it's pressed so much that people believe it's a law. That's a sad thing, is like people think that we are forced to do that and we don't have an option. And if you don't, you're crazy. Like that's what's happening,
And,
right.
and what's wrong with being crazy? So I'll give you an idea. Like early on in my path of being a Jedi, I would sit in the Starbucks that I was talking about with you earlier, and I remember one time I had my feet up. Well, I was gonna say Indian style, but it's crisscross applesauce. And I remember one of the police officers, the ones that are retired police officers, that says RSVP on the side away. He rolled his eyes at me, and then all of a sudden I just like trained myself to like sit there because I knew it would offend people. And the reason why I was doing that is because I was training myself to not be able to just all of a sudden cave when somebody didn't approve of me. Does that make sense? So a lot of times, like for these big things, like for you, like if you, this would be hard for you to like, no, you're not necessarily fighting the machine, but you're not bowing to the machine. But you, on a daily basis, you're doing a lot of small things. So this big thing, as stressful as it is, doesn't seem as much to you. Does that make sense?
Oh, she's glitching out on us. Oh, we lost
Yeah,
her.
it looks like she wanted to come back.
Sorry, I missed
Yeah.
that little combo right there.
So basically, what I was saying is,
Yes.
I was sitting Indian style in a coffee shop, and I noticed that this like retired police officer that was like they still have on patrol. He looked at me, rolled his eyes at me, and I learned that I was training myself to just not cave when somebody gives me a disapproving face.
Right.
And if you think about like a lot of successful business people or people that people would look up to, they wear the perfect suits, the glasses and everything like that, and they're so focused on their image that they're not really coming from a powered place a lot of times. So Corona was able to train herself over the course of time of practicing social disobedience, mainly for others and sometimes herself. So for her to be doing this, what she's doing now, it's a lot easier. If that's the case.
Yeah. Pushing you have to I feel in my experience, I've had to be that person to show up and literally challenge the norm, right? And push those boundaries. That's why I was talking about how sometimes it is important that we push those boundaries or cross those normal boundaries that have been set up, whatever the fuck normal really even fucking means. And excuse and pardon my French on that one, but
I think that was English.
oops. But yes, I mean, if I wasn't there or if I wasn't present to share my experience, how many voices am I silencing that have a similar experience or the same exact experience that I don't even know about?
Yeah, for sure.
So you know how earlier I was saying protesting for me, there's a very thin line because the way politics and everything is nowadays, we're so controlled and manipulated to the point where we don't even realize it. And the way I see, you know, this pandemic panning out is it is a pandemic. It is a plan to get us to retaliate. Kind of same thing with what was it, George Floyd? You know, that was a way to get us to retaliate, to act out. I think, you know, with the whole Second Amendment, they're trying to again take our rights away from us, and they're trying to make us act out in a way where we're proving that we need some form of control, right? And so with COVID and everyone quitting their jobs, and you know, protesting against this mask and the jab and all this stuff. I say this shit's military tactics, and obviously I've never been in the military, but I feel like maybe in a past life I was. But everything I see them doing, I see all the steps that they're doing and where it's leading us to. And they're forcing technology down our throat. Now, granted, it might actually just work out for the best for us. But if you look at it, you see all the censorship that's happening. So everyone's here at homes, everyone's on their computers. If I want to cut your cord, I can cut your cord at any time. If I want to shut your mouth, I can shut you up at any time, because this is what you're using, this is how you're surviving, and this is your job as well. And so at any point in time, that can be taken away from us too. So for me, I think the best way to protest against like the situation that we're in right now is to follow your true heart and your true will, and to go after what you want and create something for your own. We're all gods, in our own way. Granted, there's a higher power we're connected to, but we are created in God's image. So what does that mean, And I feel like in order to protest, that's kind of why I quit my job. I protested against, I loved my job and I loved the company and what they stood for, but I realized that they were extremely political. And I was like, y'all are getting involved with too many things that it just seems like you're following the agenda. You know what I mean? And then one day my boss walks in and I'm doing yoga in the shop, and she's like, that's against policies and procedures. And I'm like, how is it you're having me push these petitions every day about freedom, human rights, animal rights, all this shit, and I can't bend over and touch my toes when I'm 3 months fucking pregnant and I'm a manager? You had me closed last night, I opened this morning.
Shit.
And I fucking did this shit all on my own. We had a no-show with 2 employees, and I'm touching my toes, bending over, and that's against policies and procedures. I was like, you know what? You can eat shit. I quit. I quit, and I'm gonna start my own business. That was my way of protesting, because I was like, you're lies. You're nothing but lies. You're pushing this agenda for everyone to think that you're trying to make the planet or the world a better place, but your own employees don't even have freedom, and it's just like, it's like, I feel like that's what these politicians are doing to us with all this divide. It's like, no, we have to like see through the bullshit. There's so much bullshit that we have to see through and see things clearly. Hold on 1 second.
I wanted to just say thank you to everyone who's tuned in and has been supporting us. We see you. We hear your questions. We see you down there in the chat. I know some of you have actually reached out to us in the DMs and asked how, you can help. We were campaigning for Coco and the community of Mexico and how to uplift them. But yeah, if you have any other questions, pop them ahead in. I do want to say thank you to you as well, Steve and Amanda, for coming, showing up, protesting every time we meet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have to get going. So if there's any other,
I want to end something real quick, and you can pop off, or can you listen? So in San Diego, you have the buildings. And because San Diego has a lot of earthquakes, the buildings have feminine energy. So if they had too much masculine energy, then when there was an earthquake, they'd topple over. So in order to be part of a protest, you got to understand of like, if you're going to shake that up, you got to shake it up in a way that you're shaking it so you're not destructing. You're just shaking it up enough and making enough noise to get the proper attention. And if that president of that university, that president of that company, that person that can change things comes to you, make sure you come with the good instead of just anger. You come with and nobody likes demands. And you give them demands, they'll fix something over here and meet your demands, and then they'll just like fuck something up over here.
Or they'll halfway listen to your demands.
Yeah. You don't want them to be pissed off that they had to do something,
Right.
but be in a way that you're just kind of pushing the envelope and doing it on a consistent basis.
Yo, wow, you just literally cleared up why concerned students' 20 demands were never met.
Yeah. Anything else, Amanda? You good?
Hi, Corona. No, I enjoyed this conversation. Thank y'all for letting me hop in on it, because I wasn't quite sure what direction y'all were going. I know everything's always very fluid, and so I was interested to see where this would go.
Yeah.
And I love y'all's insight. Y'all have opened my mind, and I was thinking for a little bit, I'm like, I haven't experienced, protesting much, but I'm like, y'all made me realize I've actually been protesting my whole life. So thank you for making me aware of that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Have a good one. Peace.
You too, man. Peace. Thank you.